one. What's going on, team? It's another wonderful day here on a Brodacious Live podcast. It's another wonderful day. I'm excited. I have Kyle Gillette here. He's a leadership and business coach, host of the Sage Mindset podcast, developer of the Sage Leadership Framework with Sage Mindset app, and he's owner of Gillette Solutions, a coaching and consulting organization. How are you today, Kyle?
I'm good, Jonathan. Thank you so much for being on the show, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday. It's my favorite day of the week. I'll have a mojito in hand by 5 o'clock today. It's going to be fantastic. You know, it's still in that mid 60s, lower 70s here at night. So it's that perfect, outdoor weather. I'm absolutely enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm looking outside and I've got giant 40-foot, 50-foot, 60-foot trees with sun hitting them. And we're going to have kids running around our backyard screaming pretty soon. So it's a good day here. Yeah.
So Kyle is here to help us gain mental clarity and talk with us about a sage mindset. So Kyle, tell me, what is a sage mindset?
Yeah, SAGE is an acronym. And obviously we all know that sage is a plant, but we also know it means wisdom. But Sage came to me in the middle of the night. I was thinking about having some sort of framework for my business because the really successful good people have some sort of framework they use, right? And I thought, well, I need to be one of those really successful good people. And so I started chewing on an acronym and trying to come up with something. And everything that I came up with was dumb. It was like 2 S's and an R and an L, or just this combination of letters that wasn't memorable. And I was laying in bed, it was 3 a.m. in the morning, and I heard the word audibly, and I think it was audibly, it was a long time ago now, but I heard the word self-awareness. And that was the word that connected everything together. So I sprinted out of bed and I ran to the kitchen and sat down at the kitchen table from 3 a.m. to about 7 a.m. till my kids got up and started writing the thing. And it came together first as AGES, AGES. I'm like, that's dumb. And so I looked at it and I realized it spells sage as well. And what it stands for is self-awareness. So a mindset of self-awareness, a foundation of self-awareness. Picture a leadership house. And that foundation of that leadership house is self-awareness. Accountability is the nails that hold it together. Growth is the walls and the roof. And then empowerment is the windows and doors of that leadership house. There's a lot more explanation to it than that. But in a nutshell, that's what SAGE is. It's those 4 pillars of great leadership.
That's fantastic. I like that. I saw the formula that you had on your bio for us was, development plus process improvement equals profit. And that's what's kind of the name is all about. When you're an entrepreneur, we kind of get locked in maybe into what we're doing, and we're not really opening our minds completely to the different capabilities that we have or other things that are even options for us. We get very kind of like horse with the binders on, focused on what we're doing. There seems to be, many steps in development when you're a business owner. Sometimes we have to grow from the ground up. I think we identify these development points, as you stated, as leadership, accountability, setting goals, and establishing values. So I was kind of wanting to kind of hit those 4 points along with your SAGE mindset, because, people have a misunderstanding of what leadership really is. It's not us telling others what to do so much as it is empowering others to make great decisions. And that's something that takes maturity to realize. I, as a chef, was an executive chef, not having this mentality at all. I was just the iron fist. I'm going to throw something at you. You better have it right. So how do we achieve that level through leadership?
I think one of the first things that we have to do is recognize everybody's fascinating, that everybody truly is a really fascinating person. When I found out that you're a chef, that's your history, immediately I went, oh, well, I need to connect you with Jared. And made me start thinking about this conversation I had today with someone that wants to promote chefs in his business. And people are fascinating. And so when you recognize that about everyone you interact with, and most importantly, those that you interact with the most, which is typically the people in your workplace, it opens the door to something that's really powerful. And that is caring. Actually caring about the people that work for you and getting to know them a little bit. And that is what makes it possible to help them become empowered, to help them do the things that they're best at, because you actually know them, they trust you, they tell you the things they want to do or the things they don't want to do, and they start to open up, and that creates the synergy that you don't have if you don't find people to be that interesting or fascinating. But everybody has an amazing story to share. And now not everybody's going to share it at work. I get that, but they are really amazing people and fascinating people. And if they're not, then don't have them on your team, because let's be honest, some people kind of do suck. At least when it comes to doing the work.
It's true. Everyone has that one employee. You're like, God, I hired that guy. What was I thinking? You know, they don't really bond into the team. So when we have, how can we as entrepreneurs in that leadership, you mentioned connection. How do we bring out that connection? How can we really bring out that full potential?
Yeah, I think you have to be trusting. You have to trust people to do the things that you ask them to do, and let them mess up, let them make mistakes. In my book, I talk about having a risk mindset, and that you need to create a culture where taking a risk and messing up is okay. Now, obviously, we're not going to be stupid about that and make huge risks and huge mistakes that make the business fail or whatever. But if someone on your team is taking small risks or medium-sized risks and it's working out, great. Or if it's not working out, we still want to encourage that, because that's what can build some trust. That's what can build into innovation. And risks also shift things and allow you to make adjustments in your business. So those are some of the things that make a big difference. Are we frozen here?
Yeah, I'll say it took for a second there, kind of froze through. So basically, you know, we have to invest in, and really what it comes down to is us allowing them to make decisions. You know, when I have sous chefs, one of the hardest things, especially for a new sous chef, is to let them kind of basically kick the bird out of the nest, and they've got to start flying on their own. They got to run that Friday night shift without the big bad chef there to tell everybody what to do. You know, they've got to be the leader. They've got to manage that shift and handle it. But, you know, one of the things that I like to see though is when, you know, sometimes those sous chefs, they come in and they're fantastic. They're just ready to soar. They're doing a great job. And occasionally they're going to make a bad decision. Maybe they lose their temper in a shift. They kind of see, sometimes when they start to see the very tip of the iceberg of what the chef has to deal with from a, you know, a leadership standpoint, they get really frustrated. And their immediate thing is, it's like I was, well, I'm going to get irritated and I'm going to get, you know, angry. Then the next thing you know, you're like, oh, I kicked Samuel off of our shift. And it's just like, well, why did you kick Samuel off the shift? Well, he wasn't going to do what I asked him to do. It's like, okay. I was like, I'll let you do it and I'll have a talk with Samuel. Next time though, we need to do A, B, and C and de-escalate the situation, you know, to have a private conversation before we reach that point. You know, but if there is a certain point of, I got to let them fly. If they're going to have my back, I got to have their back. And sometimes there's been times where, like, I know my sous chef made a bad call. I cannot let my hourly cook know that he made a bad call per se. I've just got to have my sous chef's back. And, you know, we're just going to manage it from that perspective of, okay, this is what we're going to do now.
I have a client that he uses that language periodically when he's describing to me a scene where he talks about, he went into the room, into the meeting, and he said he describes how he tells his employees, it pisses me off when this happens and this happens, and it really irritates me when this happens and this happens, and it pisses me off when you guys do this, and I told you not to do this. And I go, I'm not gonna say his name, but I let him know, hey man, probably stop saying that, because he has a revolving door in his business. And it's because the people don't trust him, and they don't feel safe around him. And then he's not going to hurt them. And he's not really yelling. He's not yelling. His language is just, he's pissed off about this thing, but that's not language that's welcoming, that opens the door to people wanting to do things for you. If I'm always walking around saying I'm pissed off at you, why in the world would you want to do anything for me unless I basically was forcing you to? So he's slowly learning, but it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, you know, and he's definitely one of those old dogs that is hopefully going to get it. So we'll see.
Oh yeah. I say iron fist. You know, I'm reminded of stories of like different leaders, you know, throughout present. You know, not to get down the political train, but you kind of see what's happened potentially in Russia, where there's such an iron fist there that everyone's scared to tell them the truth, because there's been such an iron fist about, you're going to do it this way, and this way, and nothing else, or else. And then kind of find out now, we're not telling them, they're not being told the real information they need to know. They're being told a sugar coat of what's happening. And you see what can happen in an organization that can fall apart. Your business is the same way. Your restaurant essentially is its own microcosm of a country. It's got its own economy and everything that's there. And if everyone's scared to come and talk to you about that, then you don't have a chance to let them give input. Like you said, you're going to have a revolving door. You're not going to be able to grow in the way that you need to.
Yep. Yeah. You got to
You'd be surprised what your employees actually have in their minds. I've met some very talented chefs and, business owners. Now that I'm hopping over into the sales side of the food industry, I've met some people who are just crazy talented, but have not gotten that potential to talk.
Right. I mean, I've worked with a lot of clients, helping them to realize that they haven't hired stupid people. I mean, typically I ask them, have you ever, the people that work on your team, are they stupid? And then they'll look at me and laugh and like, no. And then I said, then why don't you let them think? Because often what happens is employers don't define the expectations they have for the employee. And then that frustrates the employer, because the employee doesn't know what they're supposed to do. And so the employee is just kind of trying to figure it out. But if the business owner would define the expectations, here's the expectations, and let their employees think freely within those expectations, all kinds of creativity and innovation happens, because the employee has their parameters in which they know what to do and what not to do. And so they're free to think and they feel safe within those parameters. But if you don't give an employee clear expectations and parameters, they struggle. And it's really frustrating to watch this happen with business owners, but it's a pattern, and it's a pattern that can be stopped, fortunately. And once it's stopped, you talk about innovation, you talk about creativity, because these folks, they've been in that role for a year and they've never been given the chance to really think. And then all of a sudden they're trusted to think, and they come up with these brilliant product ideas or service ideas that resolve problems that have been existing for years, but they've been waiting just for the moment to be asked, what do you think? What do you want me to do? What's an option here? But nobody ever asks employees that. They're always just trying to solve the problems themselves.
That's fantastic. I always kind of relate back to my restaurant world, because that's been my world for the last 20 years. It's, I've worked with so many cooks that when just given the opportunity, they have that inside of them. They might not always know how to put it necessarily into action, but that's what you as the leader are there to do, to help put it into action, and how, the how to. But chefs in particular, I mean, I had a cook with me at my last spot. I was executive chef of a 5-diamond hotel. I had a cook who just came in and was just super talented. He was already within 3 months, kind of in that driving spot to be like, hey, well, what do you think should be on the menu? And the next thing you know, you've got a cook there who has probably now, I've been gone for 9 months, and that dish is probably still in the top 2 sales, on that menu. And it's just a great dish, and it became iconic. And what was crazy is, and I had to talk to him about it a little bit, is because, well, what happened? Well, a magazine comes along, and a magazine's like, well, Chef John's dish X. And, and I tried to make sure that I've made clear to that magazine that was Brian's dish. My name's just on the door. And, of course it goes in the goes down in the halls as, well, that's Chef John's dish. And I'm like, no, that's not my dish. But, it's one of those things where he benefited, the restaurant benefited so much by just opening up the conversation of, hey, Brian, you're doing a really good job. What do you think should be on the menu?
There was a conversation I was having with a client 4 weeks ago now, and we were talking about her need to quit solving problems for her employees. And I likened it to where you're sitting at the dinner table and you have a dog inside, and the puppy starts scraping at you to try to get some food from you. And they start scraping at you, and then you just give in and give them food. I think sometimes, not to be too crude here, but I think sometimes employees do that. They scrape at you just waiting for you to solve the problem for them, to give them a treat. and that's the solution. And then they can go off and go do their thing. And so I told her that, and for whatever reason, that silly metaphor clicked for her, because she realized that that's what she's doing. People come with a problem, and it's an emergency to her. Everything's all urgent. And then she quickly delivers a solution, not necessarily the solution. And then they scamper off and go do it. And so we were in the middle of a call talking about this, and someone interrupted, and she did it right in front of me. And after that situation was over, I said, next time that happens, what's a good question you can ask? And we talked about it a little bit, but she couldn't come up with her own. And so then I said, just think about this. Ask them 4 words. What do you think? That's it. And then be quiet. Shush. Don't open your mouth. Don't
look back at them.
Yeah, just don't expect anything in particular. Just ask those 4 words. And then 2 weeks later, we talked again. And she told me that she's used that so many times, and she's using it at home on her kid and her husband. And it's totally made a huge difference for her whole life, that 4-word question. And
Right.
as a coach, that like warms my heart, because this is what employers or business owners really need to learn how to do, is just to learn to ask simple questions of your team that are open-ended and allow them to think. Because my focus as a coach is to empower people, empower businesses, so that their people are first. Everything else will follow. And that equation, development plus progress equals improvement, or plus process improvement, equals profit. Development is the development of people. It's not development of the business, it's development of the people. And then with that comes process improvement, because they're in the nuances of it. And then with that, of course, you're going to get more profit. And when that clicks for people, you get better loyalty, you get more consistency, and of course, you're going to get more profit as well. But it's not easy, of course.
Right. I like that. So the next part was accountability. Accountability can be a tough part for all of us. It's very hard for us to both accept accountability and get others to accept accountability.
Yeah.
And, how do we achieve that in our leadership style?
Yeah. Well, there's kind of two ways to look at accountability. There's accountability that's you taking care of yourself, you being accountable to yourself. And there's accountability that is about holding other people accountable and being held accountable. So the one side is me holding myself accountable, which has to do with telling people what I'm up to, glass house living, if you will, making it very clear what you expect of yourself and letting other people know, so that when you don't hit it, other people are aware that you haven't hit that goal. You haven't hit that target that you're striving for. And whether that's guilt, motivation, or whatever you want to call it, there's something about knowing other people know that you have this target in mind that keeps you accountable. And there's some other nuances to it, like putting stuff on calendars and to-do lists and all that stuff. But fundamentally, it's making that commitment to the thing that you want to accomplish. And I tell a silly story about the difference between decision making and commitment. And so I want you, Jonathan, to picture a pond. And on the pond, there's a log with 3 frogs on it. Okay. And then over to the side is a lily pad with a juicy fat fly on there that one of the frogs really wants. And you're watching this scene. Okay. And you're just checking this thing out. And then one of the frogs says to the other one, I'm going to get that fly. So you glance at the frog in shock a little bit that it talked. And then you look over at the fly, and then you look back at the frogs. How many frogs do you think are on that log?
You said 3 originally.
Yeah.
So how many are still there after that fly?
Yeah.
Well, I would think the other 2 probably already jumped after by the time it took that amount of time.
It's, what's so funny is, depending on the person's personality, they either answer 2 because they think the frog went after it, or they'll answer what you said because they're more assertive themselves, like you are, like you're going to go after it. And so this frog says there's an opportunity. You're like, no, I'm taking that one, darn it.
Oh, I was going to say, by the time you talk about it, it's already been done. I work in the sales world. That's kind of how our world works.
But the true answer in the story is all 3 are still there, because there's a difference between deciding and committing. And we all the time decide to do things, but we haven't fully committed. And fully committing is that point for that frog where his feet are almost off the log, where there's no way that he can get back on the log. He's jumping. And so we need to learn how to jump, make that commitment. And the more people we tell about the jump we're going to take, And the more people we ask to keep us accountable to that jump personally and intentionally, the more likely we're going to stay accountable to that. So that's one side. The other side is we got to keep our people accountable to their jumping, making sure that they
Right.
jump. And that's a pretty nuanced process. And the long and short of it is the expectations need to be clear. And if the expectations have not hit, you need to tell the people the facts of what has not been hit. So if a project's supposed to be done by 3 weeks from
Right.
now and it's 2 days late, there's a gap there. And that gap needs to be discussed very clearly with the facts behind what happened from the perspective of the supervisor. And then once that conversation is had, you ask the simple question of what happened here that we're 2 days late on this project. The person answers, and then you figure out what's missing there. Was it an ability problem, motivation problem? You ask those questions. And once that's figured out, then you come up with a plan. Who's going to do what, by when, and then when's the follow-up going to happen? And that's super nuanced process, but that's the overall picture of what it is. And if you can
Right.
get those 2 layers of accountability down in your leadership and within your business, it's the difference it makes is incredible. I could tell you another story here, but it makes a difference almost instantaneously. I taught a workshop on this, and people started to implement it.
Okay.
And within a day, the what's his position? He's the COO. The CEO cut out like 10 hours of work from his job because he started to hold people accountable and not do the work himself. And it didn't create any rifts. It didn't create any problems for anyone else. They were glad to have the opportunity to do that work, and were glad to take it off of his plate because the expectations were clear. The gap was defined. They had the conversation, and he saved 10 hours of work a week. Now he gets to go home and be with his family instead, just within days of teaching him how to do it. It's amazing how powerful accountability can be.
So you mentioned a minute ago about, making that jump. One of the episodes that we talked about in our previous episodes was basically discussing that, a lack of a jump is almost as bad as no decision or wrong decision, and make that leap and make that jump.
Yep. Yeah, because that goes a little bit back to the risk conversation. It's really hard to learn if you don't take a risk. And business is all about learning, man. People are all about learning. Day after day after day, we're going to get better when we're learning. But it's hard to learn if you're doing the same thing over and over again, if you're just doing the same thing that always works. And in business, that ends up being a failure because you have to innovate. You have to change. I mean, you can't have the same menu for years and years. You got to adjust it. Plus, it's boring. And so you make that adjustment, and then you learn from it, accept the feedback from that. There's the feedback from people on the accountability side of it, but there's also the feedback from the things and the customers and experiences that we have. And that can be a beautiful dance, really, because you get to take that and do something with it and make improvement with it if you're willing to take a little bit of those risks in the process and take those jumps, if you will.
I like that. So you also mentioned a second ago about setting goals, and what are some good tips for those who are out there setting goals for their team? What we need to be keeping in mind when we're setting our goals for our teams, and ways, again, we're going to keep ourselves accountable to it, and not just ourselves, but our team as well.
Yeah, I mean, most people have heard of the SMART goal acronym, so I'll just briefly share that and my little twist on it. But there's one piece of it that's unique. So obviously the goal needs to be very specific, and it needs to be measurable, and you're measuring the result that you want to get, but you're also measuring the specific actions that you take that you have 100% control of, and you're tracking that. People do not track their goals. They do not have, well, that's a little bit too broad. A lot of people don't track their goals and measure specifically the actions they're taking towards accomplishing their goals. We're gonna skip the A for a second because that's the unique piece. The R is it going to get you the result you want? Some people set a goal, but that goal doesn't actually move them towards the result they want, and that's why you need to measure it. You got to day by day measure the progress towards that goal. And then of course it needs to be time bound. And I always recommend that people set quarterly goals, 90-day goals. It may take you 10 years to get to wherever you're going, but do it in 90-day increments, because you can track that. It can be motivating, and other people can help you along the way in 90-day increments. That's how I have all my clients put their goals in, is 90-day increments, because then we can check in, reset them, make adjustments, that type of thing. But the mindset part is what I really want to talk about here. And that's the accountability part. Have you ever heard of the concept of future stories? Are you frozen again? Shoot.
I had a little bit of a glitch. Can you repeat that for me one more time?
Yeah. Have you heard of the concept of future stories?
No, I have not.
Okay, so in short,
Tell me about it.
yeah. So in short, a future story is what's a goal that you have right now, Jonathan, for the next 90 days?
For the next 90 days, for the podcast, we're wanting to get to 200 downloads a week.
Okay, so 200 downloads a week. Now, if you are going to turn that into a amazing narrative, a really engaging, intriguing narrative, as if you're already there, and you tell that story as if you're already there. So you're talking to a friend, you're like, hey, Joe, it's so awesome. Right now I'm getting 250 downloads per episode on average. And on a low day, it's just 200, but it's been fantastic. It feels so good to have fantastic guests. They've been sharing all kinds of good content, and it's been easy to do this. I'm excited for what's coming next, right? So you speak of it as if it already exists. And what this does on the mindset side of things is, first of all, it erases the doubt, because so many of us doubt the things that we pursue, right? I don't think I can do 200 downloads, or I don't think I can do $200,000 per year. I don't think I can do whatever. But when you write that future story, literally write it out, it creates this gap in your brain. Your brain says, wait, I'm here at 50 downloads, or I'm here at $100,000. But you're creating this scenario where I'm already at $200,000. I'm already at whatever the goal is. And then your subconscious goes to work and fixes that gap. So a big part of setting goals is you got to play with your mind. You got to leverage the power of your subconscious, and using future stories or writing future stories is a big piece of that. And you just do it in 150 to 250 words. Write it down, read that story consistently, and it opens your brain to how do I pull this off? How do I do this? And it removes the fears or the doubts, because you're focused on that it actually is happening versus the other end of the spectrum. So there's all kinds of ways to attack goals, but that is one of the ones that it's really exciting. It's made a big difference for myself and those that I work with.
I like that. I like that a lot. And then kind of the important in establishing our why isn't that process. We had a delay. There we go. I see you now. Can you hear me now?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Hey, so I'll re-ask the question. So why is it important in establishing our values in the development process?
Oh yeah. So if you think of values like the roots to a tree, they're what nourishes our lives. If we don't have defined beliefs or values in our lives, it's really difficult to nourish ourselves. But they also filter out the garbage, right? So the roots of trees are filtering out the stuff that's not going to be good for the tree. And we need to have values in place that do the same thing for us, that filter out the stuff that's not good for our business, not good for our lives. And so defining those very clearly is really important. And I recommend to people, figure out what the words are. I've got 6 right up here in front of me. Those are my values. But also have a story associated. Story is so powerful for our brain. So have a story associated with each of those values. For me, my first one is gratitude. So what's the story I associate with gratitude? The next one is learning. What's that story? The next one is integrity, so on and so forth. And you define a story associated with that value to get it really locked in your brain. And then when you get hit up with something that's against one of those values, you're going to know very quickly. And it's going to be a lot easier to say no, because most people have a hard time saying no. But when you can filter and those routes are really good and they're really defined, then it's way easier to say no. And it's way easier to know where you stand, where you're not going to stand, what you're not going to do, which kind of brings us back to accountability. But
Right.
they're vital. And you can tie that to keep going for a second.
You know, we talked about that. That was part of the development. Then again, that your equation was yeah, go for it. Man, this internet is there we go.
Okay.
I'll say I've never had it dip out like this.
Yeah.
Normally it will do it like one time for like an afternoon. And I apologize.
Can you hear me still? Man. Starlink ain't holding up, man. Okay, I can see you moving now.
Our link system, like, come on, baby, you can get it together, man. Oh my goodness. It's all good. I can edit.
Okay, I can hear you. So I've got a second part if you want me to share, or if you've got something you wanted to share, whatever.
No, go for it.
Okay. The other part of values is when you define your values as a leader and then embed that in the culture consistently. I mean, every week you're touching on those values. Then it gives your team a filter. It gives them a foundation to stand on. I talk about in my book that values are like the rebar to your foundation. They put pressure on that foundation because that's what rebar is for. And so that's what values are for. They put pressure on decision making. They help you to know whether this is the right thing to do or not. And they help you to withstand the things that come at you. So when your employees aren't quite sure what to do, in their mind, if those values have been defined and clearly laid out multiple times over the course of their time working with you, they're going to be able to make a judgment. And they're going to be able to make the right judgment in the process because you've empowered them to do that and specified through values and through expectations what they can do. And that opens the door again to way better customer service, way more success. And the employees are going to feel like they have this way more control, because when there's not a specific answer to a problem in a business, they know that's okay because they can look at the values and go, okay, in this situation, I can help this customer in this way. There's hotels that give every employee, I can't remember what hotel it is, but there's a hotel that gives every employee permission to spend up to $1,000 to fix a customer's problem, to fix a hotel guest's problem.
Ritz-Carlton.
Okay. Yeah. And that type of thing, that's a value, right? So it's a system too, but really behind that is a value. And if your employees know that, then they're really empowered, and it solves a lot of issues in multiple different ways.
I like that. I like that a lot. So your equation there was development, which those were all those 4 points that we just hit, plus process improvement equals profit. So talk to us about process improvement. What processes can we be improving in our businesses?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of have fundamental 5 different systems in our business. You've got financial systems, you've got marketing systems and sales systems and customer service systems. They vary a little bit in name, but there's about 5 of them. The thing that I've noticed in most businesses that I've worked with, and they come to me because they're having some sort of a problem. And so of course I'm noticing a pattern here. And that pattern is they don't know their numbers. They just don't know their numbers. And I'm not talking profit and loss numbers or revenue numbers. And sometimes I don't even know those, which is absolutely crazy to me. And they're they're successful, over $1 million sometimes. They don't know those numbers. And I'm like, how are you at this stage and you don't know those numbers? But the numbers I'm actually talking about are if you're making $1 million, for instance, and we'll go to the world of restaurants, how do you, which menu items sell the most, right? Which chef or which cook produces the meals the fastest? Which waitress is getting the highest tips? Which day brings in the most revenue? So on and so forth. Nuanced, specific numbers, because within those numbers is freedom. You know, I had an old boss that he told me, I always threw him ideas, and then I'd get frustrated because he wouldn't do anything with the ideas. And then one day he said, Kyle, facts and figures will set you free. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I didn't get it. And then the guy that I was working with, that had been working with him for over a decade, said, Jack is talking about that if you give him facts and figures to back up what you want to do, you'll probably be able to do it. And it's the same thing for us as business owners. We need to know our facts and figures. And when we do, often what that does is sets us free from the stress. That's what it really does for the business owner. When we got those facts and figures figured out, now the stress level decreases significantly, because we know what the heck is going on and why it's happening. Even if those facts and figures suck, at least we know what's happening and why. And then we can do something about it instead of trusting our guts or guessing, you know? And that's to me what all your systems are about, is building a system that gives you the numbers that you need to know. And every business will be nuanced and different in that, but building a system that gives you those numbers, spits it out, is what you need to do.
Yeah. So probably 40% of what I do on a day-to-day basis is consult with restaurants. And I can know immediately walking in how this consultation is going to go when I say, okay, well, what are the numbers? You know, how much money did you make the other night? Which almost every owner knows about how much money they make. It's like, okay, well, what was your labor cost? Oh, well, I don't know. You know, what was your labor? What's your food cost %? I don't know. And I was like, all right, well, these are the things that we need to know. And these are the systems that we got to imply to make sure that we get this consistently every single month. You know, I work with people who are hemorrhaging, like, I worked with a guy the other day. He's like, he's losing $7,000 a week. And, you know, again, I'm asking all these questions. He's like, well, I don't know. I'm just a chicken farmer. And I was like, well, you're no longer a chicken farmer. You're now a restaurant owner. Man, his business is packed. It's a little steakhouse out in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi. It's a big old barn that he's like a barn dominium that he's turned into a restaurant.
Cool.
And it packs out every single week. It's delicious. It is amazing for basically a YouTube type chef, where he just picked up every idea he had off of YouTube and put it on his menu. Cool. It's really good. It's really good. He's really passionate about the food, but he doesn't know anything about the processes of how the business works and how to, you know, implement them. And again, it's when we talked about accountability and some things like that. It's, you know, he's got probably 10 family members that work for him, you know, between his mom, his brothers, his sisters, their kids. And he's just like, what accountability do you have in all of that group? How do you know, how do you know for sure? I was like, you know, especially for family, we like to think everybody does the right thing. You know, everybody does a good job. Nobody would try to harm anybody, but too often family's the one that kind of burns us the most a little bit. How do you know that family member's not taking home one of those steaks every night? If you're not doing steak counts every day to, you know, add, you know, how many did you cut today? How many did you sell? And how many does it say in the point of sale system that we sold? You know, okay, well, I should have 3 more steaks in this box. Then you need to have a deep conversation about, with all those cooks. All right, guys, let's get together. I'm missing 3 steaks. Do we have any recooks? Did one fall on the floor? Let's talk about it. You know, it's kind of going through all those processes. It's kind of interesting to, you know, you're kind of developing more into that office side of thing. I'm really enjoying this conversation. So what are some key ways?
Can I jump in real quick? Yeah. So
yeah, go for it, please.
I think for the listener, they may feel a little bit overwhelmed by what you and I are talking about. That kind of makes us a little bit giddy and a little bit excited, because we know what it does. We know the result, how beautiful the result is when people follow through on this. But here's the deal for the listeners. Once you get it started, once you get the system in place, it's really not that hard to maintain it. And
Right.
then the beauty too is that you get to iterate on it. In other words, you get to improve on it every single week at a minimum, and sometimes, or at a whatever, you get to improve on it all the
Right.
time. And then if you can really dial it in, then it can become turnkey to the point where you might be able to step away and not have to do any of the work yourself, and you can be over the business. Everybody talks about don't work in the business, work on it. I think there's a better layer than that. It's don't work in it or on it, but work over it. In other words, you're just checking in. You're the
I mean,
consultant.
that's everybody's dream, right?
Yeah, not on it, but over it. That's what we're talking about, right? And there's another layer to that data though, because you've got business data, but you need people data too. And what I mean by that is every organization has multiple different positions. And every one of those positions should be measured. There should be specific measurables for each position. You know, for instance, the waiters and waitresses tips, you know, that should be measured. And then we should find out what makes it work. I was at a restaurant the other day and they asked me, would you like anything else? And I'm like, no. That's a terrible question.
Yeah.
If you nuance it to what else can I get for you, for example, that's going to produce far more sales. And you maybe even have a better question than that.
Oh,
But
you know, what our thing is I always tell people that, you know, if you're asking them for desserts when it's time for dessert, you've already asked too late. And it's not, can I get you something? It's, can I get you a slice of banana pudding? Can I get you, you know, hey, you know, have you seen our blank? You know, you're already upselling that when they're already 2 or 3 bites in, because then they're going to save room for that bread pudding or chocolate, you know, 5-layer chocolate cake. You know, too often we as business people, we're like, oh, what can I get for you? It's like, no, well, you know, you look at what Apple does, and I reference Apple a lot because Apple does a great job. You know, they're not just saying, what can I get for you? It's, hey, I have this service and I have this other service. And if you're really wanting a phone that does all the bells and whistles, I have this over here. They're not waiting for you to be like, well, what do you want? It's, here you go.
yep.
And, you know, we have to be in that mindset of constantly saying, here you go, versus sitting back and waiting for them to tell us what they want. People who
Yeah.
wait for what they want are just going to sit there waiting. They're not going to get an answer.
Yeah. And in the psychology world, I guess you could say, what you can do is give people forced choice. You're like, do you want chocolate cake or do you want carrot cake for
Yeah.
dessert this evening? And it's really hard if someone's at all interested in dessert to say no, just to be, because they're not actually answering the question. They're just saying
Right.
no, which is awkward for their brain because that wasn't the question. And we're not trying to manipulate here, but we are trying to make some money, and people are at the restaurant to eat out and have a good time. So, hey man, do you want chocolate cake or do you want carrot cake?
Yeah.
And those are the things that you can track though. Those are the things that your team is in 100% control over, whether they say that or not. Whether the person buys or not, they don't have 100% control over that, but they do have 100% control over whether they say it or not. And, you know, for me, I'm tracking the number of posts that I put on social media because I can 100% control that. And it gives me some sort of a result that I also track. And those are the things when you really get into it and you want to step out of your business, every position should have some sort of measurables that are being tracked. And that's what's going to help you to have more freedom, to be less stressed, and to grow your business. Because that's always the goal that I have for my clients.
I like that. So now you have a book coming up that is just around the corner. I think you've got it there. Besides, if you want to show it on the camera,
I will.
I'm so proud of you because, like, I know it's a really hard process. There's so much pride that goes into writing a book. Dr. J and I have been going through this process, and it is insanely hard. You think you could just sit there and just clickety clack it out. It does not work that way. So tell us about your book, and, you know, where can we find it? What's it about? You know, give us the preview.
Yeah, so this is the beautiful book cover that I did not create, so I can call it beautiful. It is called Sage Leadership, a 4-part framework for becoming a people first leader. If you haven't noticed, a lot of what I've talked about on this podcast is about people and putting them first in a business. The book goes through some of the things that we've talked about today on the show, and it goes in much deeper into them as well. But primarily what it is it's taking the reader through a process of mindsets and habits that they can look at and then decide which ones they want to deploy into their business or into their leadership, and then figure out which ones they already have on their team and encourage those mindsets and habits for the team members that they have. Because ultimately, you can't have all the mindsets and habits that you need as a leader. You just can't. We're only one person. We can't be great at all of them. And so I walk people through all these mindsets and habits, and they figure out what fits best, deploy that, surround themselves with the right people to make it happen more effectively with the rest of them. And ultimately, the goal is to empower the people that they're leading. And that's how the book winds down, is it winds down into how do we empower the people that are around us. And the way that I wrote it, I finished writing the last chapter at that time, which was on empowerment. And I thought, this isn't done. There's something missing. And what it was for me is I've read self-help books, which you could say that's what this book is. And I realized that I get frustrated when the author touts out this theory or this framework and they don't tell you how they use it. And then you have a hard time believing they even use it. They just like put research together. Well, so then I put it into a 10-day process. I said, to start this, do these 10 days in a row. So when you're done with the book, I don't leave you hanging. I say, these are the 10 things you can do over the next 10 days. So then they can apply it. And then the next chapter, I say, this is how I do it. Now, you don't have to copy me. I don't have it figured out, but this is how I do it. And this is how I implement my Mondays, my Tuesdays, my Wednesdays, my weekends, etc., so that they get that it's doable.
Yeah.
Very doable. This isn't something that's overwhelming. I suggest to people that you can work on these mindsets and habits for 15 minutes a day, and that's it. Just 15 minutes a day. And that 15-minute concentrated intentional time will start to shift things. Because for me, my vision, I was given of my vision in my car. I was driving. I was listening to this book, and the book was talking about you need to have a vision. And I already knew that, and I was thinking about it, and I turned off the radio and I prayed and I said, God, I want my vision. I've been praying for a long time about this. Please give me the vision. So I turned off the radio, and it's not the radio. Let's be honest. It's probably a podcast. I don't listen to the radio. Does anybody listen to the radio?
I don't. I'm about to say I'm pretty much podcast only at this point.
Yeah. So I turn it off, and I hear, the vision I have for you is to help thousands of business owners shift their mindsets and habits so I can transform their hearts. In other words, the vision is that the leaders that I'm impacting become the leaders they're meant to be. And the only way you really can do that is by starting up in the mind. You got to start up in the mind, and then it gets to the habits, and then people want to follow you, and then you can really empower people. And my goal is to help business owners get to that place so that they're impacting overall millions of people, because I'm impacting thousands and then they're impacting millions. And that, once I got that vision, I seriously cried for 30 minutes because it was so clear to me what I was supposed to do with my life. And so this is really the big catalyst to making that movement happen. This book is the beginning of that process, because I'm not in business to just make money. I'm in business to change people's lives. And that's why I wrote this, and that's why I'm so excited that it's coming out on Tuesday next week. So that's November 1st, which is amazing because I wrote this thing 15 months ago. So I was like, let's go already.
Process. That's fantastic. So with that said, where are they going to be able to find the book?
Yep. So you can find it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and then there's like 40 other retailers. It'll likely be on actual shelves at Barnes and Noble, and then a couple other actual bookshelves as well. That has to play out a little bit, but that's where it's going to be right now. If people listen to this before the 1st of November, I'm doing a limited edition hardback. And so if people want that one, I sign it and they get some other bonus content with it as well. And there's a link associated with that I can share at the end.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. That'd be fantastic. Well,
Yes.
Kyle, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us today. I know it's everybody's kind of eager to get that Friday started. You came in, hung out with us here late in the afternoon. I'm super thankful for this time. I've learned so much. I know our listeners have learned so much as well. Looking forward to getting my copy of Sage and learning more about, what I can be doing to empower my employees that I work with every single day. And I know the listeners are as well. So make sure you're going out, friends and family, make sure you're going out, supporting Mr. Kyle Gillette, and just making sure that we're doing our part to better ourselves and better our community, better our employees and our business. And again, when we're bettering our employees, we're bettering our business, we're making more money, we're having more time for ourselves to be with family, to enjoy life, have a great mental and physical life. And we just want you to be blessed. I know Mr. Kyle here does the same. Thank you so much for hanging out with us again, Mr. Kyle, and let's have a fantastic week.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You guys can find the book at book.sagemindset.com.
Fantastic. There you go, team. You go download. No excuses. Go buy it or else. I'm just kidding.